Ever wondered what a forensic doctor sees, discovers inside a body, or the clues and truths revealed? In this episode, we go behind the scenes of an unseen profession. The man who investigates the dead must determine how, why, and by whom they died. And trust me, he's seen things. Absurd violent deaths, a man found in a swingers club, a teen who kills and eats his family, charred bodies, babies as victims, and love stories that end in blood. He tells us what he saw, what he understood, and what the bodies taught him. Make yourself comfortable, turn off the lights, and get ready to discover once again the reality of the most chilling job in the world. Welcome to the second episode of Story Cube with Bernard Mark, one of the greatest forensic doctors of our time.
The worst part is telling these two children who fought for her that their mom has died. It's a devastating blow because the body was burned, but only the upper part. The upper part is nothing but burns, nothing but charcoal. They'll descend into horror, committing torture and barbarity. One of them uses pliers to pull out his tongue, accuses him of speaking ill, calls it a viper's tongue, and cuts it off.
Hello everyone. Today on StoryCube, we once again have an extraordinary guest, Bernard Mark, forensic doctor. Throughout his career, he has witnessed wild stories and anecdotes, and today he'll share them all in detail. He recently released a new book, For the Dead and the Living, where he revisits several stories he claims to have experienced. He'll have the chance to tell us about it. Bernard, welcome again to StoryCube.
Thank you.
Last time we discussed some of the stories you mentioned in your book, and I thought it might be interesting to go back to other stories you also talk about in your book, or not, maybe some various and diverse anecdotes. Let's start immediately, no transition needed. You talk about the Maréchal case, the night of the 12th. Is that a different case? What is it?
So Maréchal, this is a truly terrible case. It's early in the morning. Early morning in a small, very quiet, very discreet suburban neighborhood. Then I'm called because they've found a young woman's body. She was burned alive.
So burned alive, meaning she was still alive when it happened.
Why burned alive? Because it's at a street corner. There's a starting point, and then we see her. You see, we reconstruct her path since there are scorch marks, some elements. She manages to turn the street corner, and then she's going to collapse. And that's where we'll find the body. Meanwhile, she left fragments behind. She walked more than 20 meters, maybe 30 meters before collapsing. And it's absolutely terrible violence because the body was burned, but only the upper part. So the upper part is just burns, just charcoal. And then below, there are the legs of a young woman in shorts. An aspect that is terrible between the destruction on one side and then the evidence of obvious youth. She is a little over 20, 22, 23 years old, and you are totally shocked. And then you are even more shocked because you see her.
Yes.
I've told you twice you see her, and it's true, you do. We can only imagine from seeing the traces that at that moment she was screaming. At one point she even turns. At the end, she even spins around herself. That's how much she's caught in the flames. And then it also makes us wonder, because who in this suburban neighborhood late at night could be waiting for someone with a lighter and gasoline?
Yes, because
if not someone close.
That's the main theory. Someone gave him a...
Well, she is sprayed. That's not a theory, that's a fact. She is sprayed with a flammable liquid that is set on fire. So in the middle of the night, in a very quiet neighborhood, someone has to be there with a can of gasoline, throw it on her, and set her on fire.
So someone really has it in for her?
So who could have such a grudge against someone, especially since she's very close to home and he basically goes to find her at her place? It has to be someone close. Everyone wants to have that close person. And the close person won't come out, won't emerge. That's what gives the film The Night of the 12th.
How do you investigate a body that's been burned like that? You can find some things, but otherwise there's nothing to...
Well, in this case, there are some things that are obvious. There are elements that clearly show she died from burns. She didn't die from smoke inhalation. We would have preferred she died from smoke inhalation, losing consciousness. No, that's not the case. She's not a fire victim. She's really a victim who was burned alive. It's the worst death you can imagine. It's the ultimate torture in the Middle Ages, burning people at the stake, making them burn alive. It's the horror of horrors.
Does your body feel it when you're burned alive? Or, on the contrary, do your nerves disconnect?
There are bound to be excruciating pains. Fortunately, we hope that the intensity of the burns made it last only a few moments.
Yeah, that's right.
A few moments. That's really what I wish for him. Really, that's what I wish for him. And on those images, on that element, Dominique Moll and his team are asking for technical advice. They are asking for technical advice, saying to me as a forensic expert, do you know? Because in movies, they recreate bodies using silicone. Fake bodies of corpses. We're not going to dress up an actor. We make bodies, models that are extremely realistic. And they ask me if I can help them a bit. If I have pictures, things like that. I say, yes, pictures of a half-burned body. Yes, yes, of a young woman. I say, wait, tell me the story a little. Yes, yes, it's a story that happened. You didn't really follow where I was. I tell them, yes, unfortunately, I think I can help you. Because I was the one who was there. I was the one who did that body removal. It was something intense at the time of filming, and for the director, and he agreed because he received all the César Awards. To talk about Maud Maréchal and share his thoughts. No, not as we see it visually for the producers or the people who helped with the film. He got those as well, but most of all, he thought about this young woman whose story we wish were clearer. It's a great hope. And now it's the trial. This case has reached the cold case division. We're hoping. Knowing that among the names of people who were interviewed at the beginning, the author's name is definitely there. It's not a random encounter. It has to be one of those who were interviewed who said, I don't know, I wasn't there. I gave you an alibi. He's there, he's on the list. That's what's bothering the investigators, saying, we have the name, we've interviewed him.
It's just that we don't know which one, that's all.
We don't know which one. He didn't turn himself in. He must be there, and that's what gives the night of the 12th its strength. For those who haven't seen it, go watch it or watch it again on replay, however you like. But it's a wonderful film.
We have no information about, I don't know, was there an argument?
They explored everything. They have all the information. The most logical thing would be a rejected lover or someone who could go that far. And with this kind of murder, there's definitely an aspect of jealousy, a desire to harm the other person, and also to destroy, in the injuries, to destroy the face, the visage. When we describe someone, and when our images of a living person, when we meet someone, we remember their face, their appearance. When these kinds of destructions occur, it's about destroying the personality and the face of the other. I want to destroy the face of the other. I don't want to kill her. If I did, I would have struck differently. I just want to ruin her face. So here we see something that has to do with jealousy, with wanting to destroy and seeing that beauty destroyed.
I'm stepping away from this case for a moment to ask you a little question that's been on my mind for a while, but has it ever happened to you to come across, I don't know, absurd deaths or people who killed themselves but in a kind of strange or unexpected way?
Oh yes, unfortunately, absurd deaths do happen, and they often come with an extra dose of stupidity. I remember a good man who wanted to show off his ability to climb on top of train cars and run. The problem was he got under the overhead wire. He got a very nice electric arc. So the electric arc formed between the person, he acted as an antenna, if you will, by running between the train car and the overhead wire above. In fact, that's 20,000 volts, so it's not surprising. He ended up as a human barbecue, and then a second one who absolutely wanted to do some do-it-yourself. And while doing do-it-yourself, he put his lawnmower, his big lawnmower, on an edge so he could slide underneath and try to clean the rotor properly. And the lawnmower tipped over onto him, and lifting 200 kilos of lawnmower. So unfortunately, he ended up with, on top of everything, the imprint of the rotor from the lawnmower he was trying to clean on his body, which compressed him. Which just goes to show that absurd deaths can happen.
It's wild. You could get crushed and killed by a lawnmower.
That gives me an asphyxiation syndrome because the weight is such that the ribcage can't breathe anymore.
And you don't actually have enough strength to lift those.
There are 200 kilos to lift, so That's why you have to be careful when maintaining large gardens.
And the guy running like that on the train, do you think he died instantly?
Oh yeah, he got hit there. It was a stupid bet saying, I'll show you, I can run on the train.
Were there people with him?
Yes, there were people who watched him run and saw him come suddenly change. Like in cartoons when lightning strikes, except this is in cartoons. He illustrated it himself.
How does it happen? Does the body burn, or on the contrary, does it just go out and that's it?
Oh, well, that's the body. Some parts are burned because there's a huge electric shock that's going to happen.
There's a case you talk about in your book, I think. It's the femicide in Judicial of 2 teenagers. There's a story about 2 teenagers whose love ends in tragedy. What is it?
A complicated and difficult story, this story of femicide. It's the story of a couple who came from abroad. They settled down with their 2 children. And there's an atmosphere of violence that prevails. This atmosphere of violence is such that one day the son steps in between the violence, between the father and the mother. The oldest son, 16 or 17, is a brilliant boy who wants to study computer science. And the police intervene. He is prosecuted because he hit his father. Well, surprising. Since the father is violent, he's told to leave the house and is evicted. We make a Solomon's judgment. The son gets a part and the father gets a part. We don't really pay much attention to the mother, who doesn't come by anyway. We don't see her in this unit, our medico-judicial unit. Then she just disappears as things progress. And then the father is furious. He waits. And then one day he'll go back home. He'll go back home armed. He's going to go after his wife. He's going to stab her. He's going to kill her brutally. The son is there again. He's fighting with him.
He's fighting the father to save the mother?
Trying to save the mother who is there and being hit. And then there's the younger brother. So a few months have passed. He's grown up. The younger brother, he's about 15 years old. He will step in and try his best to stab his father. Not very well, actually. He doesn't hurt him. And then the father manages to push them both aside. And then he ends up hanging himself. And we're in a climate of total violence, because there's this mother who was killed savagely. A stab and relentless attack.
And it was in front of the children?
In front of the children, they were there, they were. At some point they left because they were also hurt in the incident. The father hit, it was extremely violent. So we have them, they're in the emergency room. We're also at the crime scene where there are 2 dead. The father, he survives for a little while. He's taken to an intensive care unit and then he eventually dies.
Because the father hanged himself afterwards?
The father, he hanged himself right after. Then the emergency services arrive. We take him down. And we have both this situation, this femicide, the presence of the children. It tells us a lot about what's happening today. There are a lot of things. Children's presence was only recently added as an aggravating factor in the French Penal Code. We know these children are affected and will live with it. How can we support them? We will have to break the bad news to them. And here we will ask the most senior person, the one with the highest rank, as the military would say, to clarify for the medical examiner and pediatricians. It's complicated to announce everything. They're going to ask me, and I'll have to deliver the first bad news. It's terrible for those 2 children who fought for her. It's to say your mom has passed away. And we use the term your mom when we talk to them. We can't say your mother. We can't be too distant. And take care of them, because both of them are helpless. They're lost. And then the second bad news a few days later is having to tell them about their father's death. So for them, it's something that's both traumatic and a relief. They witnessed his violence toward their mother and, in a way, feel relieved. One even says he deserved it. And the other says, he's my father. It's ambivalence. These are terrible things. Still, he's my father. It's difficult in this situation. You notice the terms differ. They mention their father and mom.
Yes, that's it.
And also we're used to it because mom is about affection. And my father, he's distant. He creates that distance. What happens next? The 2 teenagers become orphans. They become 2 orphans in a complicated situation as their family came from abroad. Now in France, they're fully integrated. 2 17-year-olds, one about to earn his high school diploma, which he will take when the time comes. And the second one is already, he must be in 10th grade.
Maybe just before we get back to talking about teenagers' lives, do you know anything about the mother's death? Did she suffer or not?
It's a fight beyond words. There were several blows, not just one, because she was moving. And here, we talked about it in the first meeting when we brought up the how. You can clearly see the struggle. You can clearly see what we call defensive wounds. At one point, she reached out to grab the weapon.
Because what does he have? He has a knife.
He has a knife, a big knife, and she's going to hurt herself by holding on, by trying to hold it. And despite that, he's going to keep going. So these are things that really show us how extreme the violence could have been. In addition to what we call projections, there's the morphoanalysis of blood stains. It's a very scientific term, but it's the projections that will tell you whether the person was standing at that moment, or on the contrary, if they had started to lie down, or if they were sitting when it happened, and so on. The elements that will reveal this show we're dealing with something terrible. Crime scenes are unique in that compared to autopsies or our examinations. It's that here, you're in a living environment. You have death in a living environment. Death, when we have a body, in an autopsy room on a stainless steel table that looks like, in a place that looks like an operating room, we know very well that it's a medico-legal act. We're in a bubble. Well, here, you're not in a bubble anymore. There's the vase of flowers, maybe she bought them the day before, and the picture frame with the kids from the last vacation, and a bloody body that's there. So those images, they're very difficult. You have both the blood and the teenager's room with, as you can imagine, the manga, the PlayStation that's there with, you see life, and then suddenly death right next to it. And you can't separate them in that scene. So it's extremely hard.
Do we know what she died of in the end, the mother? I mean, the cause?
She dies from the blows, partly due to blood loss from damaged vessels and also from respiratory injuries. There too, you know, it wasn't an instant death.
So the teenagers, are they growing up a bit?
Well, they take it in, and then you have to manage everything because there's a series of misfortunes after misfortunes. For them, they become orphans, then feel orphaned again. Both of them perfectly integrated, wanting to continue their studies in France, to speak French, and so on. With a family, an entire family that is abroad and becomes the only ones who have parental authority, since parental authority is transferred to the family. So with complex situations.
Just to clarify, did they have family in another country?
Yes, they have their family and they were from South America. And in South America, that's the only place where logically, by administrative logic, I remember that with the nurses, with everyone, we all looked for clothes for the teenagers because when they left their home, the place where the crime happened became a crime scene. Crime scenes, like in all the television shows, are closed off and sealed. So their spare t-shirt, it's behind police seals, you can't remove it. And if the guy doesn't have any socks or needs to change his sneakers, they're on the other side. So everyone managed to get by. Some have a teenager, some have pants. Who has what? To help them out. Things that the judicial system has trouble understanding because in the judicial system you can exclude the victim. The victim is only used to prove that there was a murder. There's the body, the victim becomes just a body. But there are also the family, people, feelings around it, and we have all of that. Forensic doctors, they're forensic but also doctors, so they care too. And we welcome these situations with open arms, you see, because there's more to it than just the report.
Are they both doing well today?
Today we did all we could for them. They're doing well. What a big question. We often see this violence in young children, this violence in couples accounts for more than half of personal violence cases today. And it happens within the family environment, it happens at home. When there's yelling, screaming, or things thrown in an apartment, everyone notices. Next door, the children weren't there. They were in their room. I'm thinking of parents breaking everything in their house. The children are awake and scared behind their doors. They stay inside, hearing everything. Me, I have people or children who brought me back. Scenes vaguely recorded, vaguely filmed, or at least with sound, where you hear screams, yelling, things falling. It's very hard, it's very hard.
You've had homicide cases disguised as suicides. For example, someone commits murder and tries to make it look like a suicide.
Yes, there are stories, a few poorly done ones, where someone tried to make it look like that by moving the body a bit or trying to reposition it. Stories, for example, about hangings. I had one with a hanging that someone tried to fake, except that the knot didn't match. And a hanging knot has particular characteristics.
What do you mean?
It's set high, rises slightly, leaves a neck mark, and it was clear these things had been done. There were also dragging injuries.
Dragging, meaning what exactly?
When you drag a body, 70 kilos, 80 kilos, that's heavy. It's heavy, so obviously you're going to wear it down, do that kind of thing. So there were things that were incongruous, that didn't make sense, that couldn't have happened in this story. Like a story about a death in a home where the son had probably suffocated the mother and then left some pills nearby. The son with a psychiatric history who lived with her. Suffocated, then removed the pillow on which traces were found. Because in these kinds of cases, the medical examiner is not alone. We also have forensic sciences, forensic medicine, so sampling, DNA, detection, a lot of things that will help us. And we're truly working together to find these elements.
Does it often happen that you have people who commit a murder but then try to cover it up by... Is that something that's common or not really?
Well, it's often inside houses, inside homes. People will try outside as well. The perpetrator will try to make it look like other people could have come. Since it's open, it's on the street, so normally anyone could have been there. They'll try that, and when it's inside, they'll cover it up, though sometimes clumsily.
How do they respond when you present evidence like showing the person didn't do it? Do they admit it immediately or still try to...
People will always stay in denial. They'll be stubborn. They'll follow the lawyer's advice who tells them not to say anything. Well, we're going to see a whole lot of things. There are some sensational cases. Right now we're judging the Jubilat case with no body found or someone said no, and we just don't know. Forensic medicine can't explain everything. We still need to have some physical evidence in order to judge.
You mentioned another case in the book about a prostitute allegedly attacked with a knife. What happened?
It's a pretty terrible story because it's a story of pure violence. That kind of violence happens to people who are often in a context of poverty. A poor prostitute in a poor van, it's not exactly appealing.
In a van?
It really is. She's there. She's an African woman in her early 50s who, well, it's poverty in a few words. And she comes across a madman who will try to kill her, who will really slash her, hit her. She fights like a lioness. She pushes him away. She manages to throw him out of the van. She ran. She's covered in blood. He gave her big wounds on her arm, on her forearm. He tried to hit her in the chest. She has wounds, things that are horrible. She will manage to get help before collapsing, and he will run away. But it's absolutely a real massacre. It's a real horror, this story. And then double horror, or even more horror, because it heals badly, because it leaves her scarred. And every time she sees her body, or simply when she washes herself, she'll see her scars. She has almost meters of scars when you add them all together. And the perpetrator, because of a delay, because of being summoned again to court, will be able to leave and maybe be summoned again for a trial. The perpetrator is a truck driver, and he's a foreign truck driver. Needless to say, I can hardly imagine that we'll ever be able to bring him to trial.
So he wasn't even... Okay.
So, that victim, not only was she marked in her flesh in the most violent way, she saw herself dying. She really saw herself dying. She fought with what we call the energy of despair. She had the energy of despair. And as for him, she knows he will never be judged. What we would like to have in justice is beyond us and shapes us.
Why is that? Is it because he went back to another country?
He left during the jurisdiction period. He found a way to be, after serving a sentence, he had served his time, and then he was supposed to appear at Libre. Needless to say, it seems highly unlikely to me that he would come back from his distant country.
You also mentioned Faride in the book, a woman tortured by her son.
It's a very harsh story. The really harsh stories we talk about are often found within families. We've seen many cases with this relentlessness. And here, the son who's a drug addict, absolutely wants money. And he's going to ask his mother for it once again. So he knows that if he asks her for money, he's asked her so many times that his mother will say no at some point. And then he pretends by saying, I'm sick, I'm not feeling well. It's his mother, so she comes and says, I'm not. He's a little farther away, so come with your car. So she comes with her car, she arrives, and then actually instead of a sick son, she will find a son and an accomplice. And they're going to attack her, hit her with a baseball bat, try to steal what she has, her bag, a bit of money, take what she has. And then, not only that, but they want even more. And they will go as far as horror, because there they will commit acts of torture and barbarity. One of them takes out pliers, pulls out his tongue and says, you say bad things about me, you have a viper's tongue, and he cuts off his tongue. And so we have this woman, totally wounded, seriously injured, bleeding, whom they leave for dead almost. She passes out. In pain, she falls, and the two of them go on the run. They take, I think, the car, they steal the car, and they drive off.
Do they realize what they've done at that moment?
They were probably under the influence of substances enough to be completely numb and just leave her like that. And this woman, there will be treatments, necessities, very complicated things. And a son who will not regret what happened. Just as the accomplice will realize he was at the height of horror, the son will not regret it. And paradoxically, almost not the father. At the assizes, the first time they are heard, the father says, yes, that's normal. She has a viper's tongue, and that viper's tongue, in a way, they wanted to tear it out of her.
What does that mean? Does it mean the father knew that he was...
It's complicated. People say things when they're faced with a choice. In any case, the choice at the assizes, having attended, the choice the first time, when the pasts were a choice. More for his son, whom he saw being put in prison, than for his wife. It's pretty harsh to hear that and see that today. Today, I believe the assizes are from 2024, so they're recent.
The woman today, did she survive? Did she still?
She survived. She still has after effects, because fortunately the wound wasn't as deep or as serious, but there are still after effects and things that were very striking. But when you get to the point of committing acts of torture and barbarity, we're always afraid of what humans can do.
Do we actually know what the two boys ended up getting, or not necessarily?
So they filed an appeal. On appeal, only one of them, the son, submitted it. And on appeal, he was sentenced to a few more years. I think he got 1 more year. The sentence was supposed to be about 15 years, but it was actually shorter. My case was tried alongside the Kim Kardashian trial, but far fewer journalists attended mine.
No surprise. There's another category you've probably dealt with, sexual violence in couples. Have you had cases like that?
This sexual violence in couples is something that's becoming more and more significant. We've measured it among the women who come in, who have filed complaints, and whom we see in our forensic medical units. 25% of them are victims of sexual violence. And it will affect young couples. It will affect couples who are already together. And we see a lot of scenarios that are scenarios of violence, of sexual violence, many of them which are reproductions of pornographic scenarios. A man wants to act out at home with a woman who doesn't want to, isn't a porn actress, and ends up in these situations in sexual obligations. So, to cope, some manage by drinking alcohol because it's unbearable. Some manage by taking medication. And I remember a rather sordid and very complicated story about a woman, the wife of an officer, whom the man would take to swinger clubs. To be at the disposal of one person after another. His pleasure, his fantasy was to see her being watched come by other men whom he would also sometimes bring home. There was only one difficulty, because in the story some people say, listen, it was still the lady who did that. When she's under the influence of alcohol to cope with the pain, the lady no longer knows what she's doing. And these chemical submissions, in a way, we can see them. It doesn't have to be a Pellicut story. The Pellicut story just brought this to light. But these kinds of stories, we're seeing more and more of them. with the difficulty of proving, attesting, or seeing. I was talking about this story in an environment that would normally be well-mannered, respectable, where things like this aren't supposed to happen. And these kinds of stories, we see them in all environments, in all places, and a lot also among young people. We often see this violence, especially sexual violence, frequently occurring among young couples. Don't assume couples today are just old pairs who dislike each other after 50 years. Couples who have been together for 50 years, you find them among our parents and grandparents, but less and less nowadays. On the other hand, there are more and more young couples. And these scenarios, which are acted out, reproduced, and put into the author's imagination, are things we see more and more often.
You've handled infanticide cases involving children, which must be some of the toughest cases.
Infanticides, yeah, it's pretty terrible. I remember a case of infanticide where the woman had really planned it. She got help from her husband to try to cover it up, something absolutely terrible, which led us to criminal court with a child who? A little girl who really wanted to live, because they had to use at least 3 or 4 methods to manage to kill her.
Did they finally succeed?
They succeeded, but they did succeed by trying to strangle him, then stabbing him with scissors, then hitting him, all of that in a kind of total horror, in the home of people who couldn't be more unremarkable. Calm on the surface in a perfectly orderly house without dust and a kind of absurd crime. Because the pregnancy, we didn't need it, or it was annoying because we would have to remodel a room when everything was perfectly in order.
It's because the girl was pregnant that, as a result, they said, no, we don't want it.
Yes, with a couple perfectly capable of having one, of taking responsibility, both working, no social problems. So our stories from the inside and our stories about infanticide and our stories about sexual violence concern a large population, which is not necessarily a population of usual delinquency. You shouldn't imagine that they are awful, dirty, and mean.
But how does it work? Do they just agree and go?
So there was a kind of paradox. There was a man who was completely withdrawn. On top of that, he was employed by his wife's parents, so he had a very subdued personality, and then there was a lady who had truly taken the lead. This infanticide story is one of my failures, since we did provide that evidence, and in a rather nasty way. There were many discussions that convinced the jury, stating it must be pregnancy denial. She didn't know she was pregnant and she felt helpless. Denying the fact that the husband, there was no pregnancy denial, he was involved, etc. So we erased everything. It was a time when pregnancy denial was a bit trendy. So you have to be careful with interpretations depending on the period. There were times when, having had a difficult youth, explained things, or at least was a big reason for forgiveness or reduced sentences. Some people face hardship without becoming violent, while others are violent without experiencing hardship. So you have to put things into perspective.
So, did the parents end up in prison, or was it the other way around?
Well, they didn't even see the detention area. They were brought in, they left, and the trial was never retried. But there is the judicial truth. Sometimes it can be questioned, but it is declared.
Is there one last thing you'd like to talk about today?
I have a recent story about a little girl, a victim of violence, and a victim of violence by her brothers who assaulted her. And because of that, the child was completely disturbed, completely helpless. And so when I examine this little girl, she's 11 years old. And like all children who are victims of this kind of abuse, she sometimes speaks in a way that's a bit emotionless. They can tell you terrible things, and then she's gonna tell me 17 minutes of horror. 17 minutes of horror. Why 17 minutes? Because she tells me so many things that I say to her, listen, I can't write everything down, you're going too fast. Can I record you? She says to me, well, yes, I don't mind. She describes 17 minutes of horror caused by 1, 2, then 3 brothers.
Her own brothers?
Her own brothers. older than her, obviously, sometimes together, sometimes not together. She says it with terrible words. She says they weren't always, all three of them. Sometimes one of them stayed at the boarding school because he's in a boarding school at a high school. She calmly describes these horrors, abominations for a little girl. And she ends her story with, and that's all. And that's all. It's terrible. It's terrible because it means she got out. She is detached? Detached. She manages psychologically to be totally detached. Unfortunately, in a way, because this dissociation, what we call traumatic dissociation, being dissociated, is the only way for her to survive. And unfortunately, we see these kinds of stories more and more. And minors are not spared. And we see stories that are still terrible. Today, in 2025, in the 21st century, even though we have a lot of things and we're trying to communicate them. So, if you have stories like this around you, try to let people know. Call 3919, try to help get them out. And don't have stories that are too long to tell the forensic doctors. I don't want to hear about 17 minutes anymore like...
Yes, that's it, of course. We'll obviously put the minors on the phone, whose numbers are now showing on the screen. Bernard, thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
In your book, you mentioned these anecdotes. There are 15 stories, correct?
About 15, yes.
Roughly 15 stories based on experiences you've had. How would you describe this book to those unfamiliar with the first episode?
Is access to true stories, stories told as closely as possible since the witness, who is the medical examiner, tells them. But it's also things to make us think, and not just about the grim aspects. It's about explaining our society a little, seeing it, understanding it. And behind that, also for all those who want to imagine prevention. Because the wonderful world would be the one where forensic doctors are just chatting in excellent company, but not writing books about their experiences.
Yes, that's right. For the Dead and the Living was published by Maréchal.
Absolutely.
And you said it's available almost everywhere.
In all good bookstores, as they say.
Incredible. Thank you. That's the end of this episode. If you want to join a StoryCube episode, email us a brief summary of your experience using the address shown here. For everyone else, I'm adding 2 episodes here on your screen. Click to keep spending the evening with us. With that, this was Noah. Have a good evening.